delegates, guests, and official family, my name is Dusty Kelly, and I'm a member of Local 891 in Vancouver and a member of the Women's Committee. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, a true Labour leader among women in Canada and who hails from our Big Sky Prairie province of Saskatchewan. Barbara Byers is a champion of the underdog, a fighter for all workers, marginalized workers, women workers, workers of color, Indigenous workers, workers with disabilities, and gay, bisexual, lesbian, and transgender workers. Her career in union activism began in 1979 when she was a social worker in Saskatchewan, protesting government cuts, contracting out, and attacks on workers' rights. In 1984, she was elected president of what is now the Saskatchewan Government and General Employees Union, the first woman president of such a provincial body. She then went on to be the president of the Saskatchewan Federation of Labour, and in 2002, she was elected executive vice president at the Canadian Labour Congress, Canada's federal congress representing over 3 million workers. Please join me in welcoming Sister Barb Byers.
Thank you so much. I'm going to move these notes here because I have been known to walk off with notes, and sometimes people want them later. Thank you, merci beaucoup, gracias, bonjour tout le monde. Thanks so much to your Women's Committee and to IATSE for the invitation to be here with you. I am excited to join you here today for this historic event, your first women's seminar attached to your convention. I hope all the historians in the crowd are taking note of this. You are all groundbreakers today. You are all trailblazers today. I bring you greetings on behalf of the CLC officers. This is the first time that I brought greetings on behalf of the officers when I wasn't one of them. I'm 17 days into my graduation. It's another new step for me. Our President, Hassan Yousaf, I believe, is going to be joining you later this week. And before I move into my remarks, I do want to acknowledge that no matter where we gather on Turtle Island, also known as North America, Canada and the continental U.S., we are in the lands of the First Peoples, people who welcome strangers to these territories. People who welcome strangers to these territories and that we now share responsibility with to take care of Mother Earth. We're also reminded that as they welcome some of our ancestors, so too do we have the responsibility to welcome others to these lands. Thank you. I've written and rewritten this presentation many times in the past couple of days. There's so much that could be said, but I was told that I had 15 minutes, and I'm very conscious every time you applaud that, oh my God, I'm going to go over. And there's going to be some things that I can't cover that are going to be near and dear to your feminist, activist, trade unionist heart, but maybe there's another time we can share some of those. I had the pleasure to share a supper with some of your folks on Friday night, and what kept coming back to me after our discussions was that our struggles as women in society, as trade unionists, as feminists, are in constant evolution, but also have a constant theme. And it's interesting that you started with bread and roses, because that's what the theme is for me, bread and roses. Just as the women of Lawrence, Massachusetts marched in the streets in 1912 for bread and roses, so too did the women around the world march on January 21st, 2017 for bread and for roses. The women of Lawrence marched for a 54-hour work week. They marched because they were dying at the average age of 26 from the dust and the looms in their factories. They marched because they were discriminated against as immigrant women. They marched to have some dignity in their lives. Yes, they marched for bread, but they marched for roses too. And many women have marched before that strike, and many have done so since. And many will continue to do again and again and again until we achieve bread and roses for all. Let's consider just some of the calls for bread and roses women were on the streets for on January 21st and many other days before and after that. Let's talk about pay equity. When I was a new activist and I discovered this thing called equal pay for work of equal value, by then my mother's and my older sister's generations had fought for and mostly won equal pay for equal work and equal pay for similar work. I know there are places where we haven't quite achieved that, but mostly it's a reality for women. And we could thank the trailblazers that you just heard for achieving some of those bread and roses gains for women. As a young activist, it seemed so logical to me that we needed to end gender-based wage discrimination, and I couldn't figure out why we hadn't done it and why it couldn't be done quickly. But the forces of division and discrimination are powerful. The pay gap around the world is still with us, sisters and brothers. Today in Canada, the pay gap for full-time, full-year jobs is still about 70 cents on the dollar, about where it was when I was a new activist. For women of color, it's about 64 cents on the dollar. Indigenous women, it's 46 cents, and it's about the same for women with disabilities who face an increased struggle to find any work. Yes, in the unionized environment, the pay gap is smaller, but there is still a gap. These gaps have been closed around the world with protracted fights at the bargaining table, in the courts, at human rights hearings. In two of the most well-known struggles in Canada, Bell Canada and the Government of Canada, the cases took over 15 years, and around 18% of the women affected had died before the cases were settled. Their estates received a payout, but don't you agree that it would have been much better if those women had received their bread and roses during their work lives and during their retirement years? We're not giving up this fight, sisters and brothers. Around the world, women continue to organize for pay equity. This is a conversation that occurs everywhere we go. We're not going to stop until all jobs are paid for their value and not for the gender associated with who holds the positions. I call on you that when you return home after this great convention, I ask you to take up the call for an end to gender-based wage discrimination. Women are depending on you. The introduction talked about our work that we've done in the trade union movement about violence against women. Unions around the world have long advocated to end violence against women in our workplaces, in our unions, and in our communities. Next year, the International Labour Organization, there will be a discussion, hopefully leading to a convention, to end violence against women and men in the workplace. Again, this seems like a logical discussion to have internationally with workers and employers' organizations and governments. But I continue to be amazed that it took years and years to even get this discussion on the agenda for the International Labour Conference. How can we have roses in our lives if we face violence, harassment, and discrimination when we go to work? How are those not workplace toxins just like any threat to health and safety? In Canada, we waged a long struggle to eliminate the import, export, and use of asbestos, and we're going to be no less vigilant to eliminate violence in our workplaces. On a related issue, internationally, unions, labor centrals like the International Trade Union Confederation and global union federations, the ILO, academics, and many others have joined together to research, as you heard, the effects of domestic violence in the workplace, and to provide educational tools for our leaders and our activists to take up this call at the bargaining tables and in advocating for legislative change. It is incredible work. We're already seeing results at bargaining tables to provide paid time off dedicated for victims of domestic violence, to provide workplace safety plans, and so much more. I know that the IATSE locals in Canada have been taking up this challenge, and you will achieve results that you can proudly share the next time you gather together with your sisters. Another bread and roses issue is childcare. Childcare is an issue for every person. We all depend on someone who depends on childcare. But I would say to you, why has it been so difficult to achieve quality, affordable, accessible, culturally sensitive childcare for every child and their family? Now, there are countries like the Nordic countries that are much better on this issue, much better than the US and Canada. We need to look to them to deepen our determination of what is not only possible, but also essential. Childcare is very much a part of the path to achieve women's economic equality. If you cannot find childcare, if you cannot afford the childcare when you find it, if you're concerned about your children because the only childcare you can find is less than reliable or safe and doesn't have qualified childhood educators, then as women, our economic security is undermined again. In Quebec, when the government had introduced a program of $5 a day childcare, it opened up access for women to enter and re-enter the workplace. 10 years after they had their program, they discovered that women in Quebec had gone from the lowest participation rate in workplaces across the country to the highest. Do you think maybe it had something to do with the fact that there was childcare for their children? Around the world, women struggle to find safe care for their children. We have a responsibility in the trade union movement to ensure that quality, affordable childcare is there for every child. Childcare is bread, and it is roses too. Collective bargaining and the voices of women, and you've heard that just a few moments ago. As women, we know that our wages and working conditions are better in unionized workplaces. And we know that we still have benefits and rights to achieve, but we will ensure gender job justice for women in our bargaining groups and in many other workplaces. We know that when we gain at the workplace and our bargaining tables, they ultimately become the rights for others in non-union workplaces. Sisters and brothers, we need to strengthen the voices and influence of women in our unions, at our bargaining tables, in our legislative agendas. You've continued to do this by having this event. Because of women before you, this was possible. Because of women right now, the determination of your Women's Committee, this event was possible. Because of your determination to move forward, this will become part of your history, part of your present, and your future. Because of you, women coming behind you will achieve even more. And I would remind you that we need to ensure the greatest diversity possible in the representation by women. Our strength will come from our diversity, from every woman knowing she has a place and a space and a voice in her union. A final word. Canadian unions have been doing a lot of work at a program that we call Together Fairness Works. It focuses on both our public image, but also our internal outreach to our members. We've had to become more disciplined and vigilant about reaching out to our unengaged members, those who may be silent supporters but don't want to become a steward or go to a meeting or a rally. And it's been difficult for us from time to time. We're so accustomed to going and asking our members to do something or to support a cause that we've strayed from finding out what's important to them. We've adopted a mantra of go, listen, build. Go where the members are, listen to what's important to them, build on that relationship. And what we know from our research and our discussions is that women are huge supporters of unions, but they also have lots going on in their lives. They're struggling to find childcare. Their wages are lower than they should be. They are the largest group of workers in precarious work. They're trying to achieve bread and roses in their lives. I ask you to go listen and build with the women and men of IATSE. This group of activists will achieve much more today and into our future if we do that. We'll achieve so much more by reaching out to our unengaged members so they can be part of the struggles nearest and dearest to our hearts. I also want to say that while you're doing that, please make sure that you're telling the world about your union and the great work that your members do. I'm one of those people that always stays at the end of the movie to watch the credits. Yep. I want to... Yay. I'm really glad for that reaction, because all the people I say to sit down, I'm watching the credits. I want to see the names of the people that are the silent creators. When I go to live theater, I'm as interested in the sets and the costumes and so much else as I am in the actors and the stories, which could explain why I usually go to theater several times, like I've seen Warhorse 3 times and Kinky Boots 5 times. Just name 2. So I know many of the people who create the magic are women. I want you to take every opportunity to let the public know about your skills. Take every opportunity to tell the story about women in IATSE. And maybe it's time for a new video as well. Well, just an idea. We got to build, what was it? We have to build on our history. I leave you with some of the words from Bread and Roses. As we go marching, marching, we standing proud and tall. The rising of the women means the rising of us all. Bread and roses, bread and roses. Gracias, merci. Thank you, sisters and brothers, for the absolute privilege of being with you today.